From KPFK in Los Angeles, California, Valley Free Radio in Florence, Massachusetts, WNUC in Detroit, and BikeTalk.org worldwide, this is Bike Talk.
Bike Talk.
Welcome to Bike Talk. I'm Taylor Nichols.
And I'm Nick Richard.
Hey, Nick.
Hey, Taylor.
You know, one of the things I learned on my little trip was that friendship is not a zero-sum game.
Okay. Well,
Meaning that if I meet someone new and they become a friend, I don't have to dump a friend. You know what I mean? There's room in my life to meet more people, especially if they care about something that I care about.
That's good. Some people think they don't need more friends, but there's always room for more.
Right. Well, I have gone through that feeling of like, hey, man, I got enough friends. But I think you only feel that way if the new friend is someone you don't really want to be friends with. But if the new friend is someone you kind of dig, then there's room.
And you made a couple.
I did. And I bring that up today because I just got a text from Kay Schuster. And I don't know if you remember Kay, but Kay is the 71-year-old woman who I met on the bike trip who is riding across the country for the second time after doing it when she was 21 in 1976. And she sent me a picture of her on the Badger Ferry, the same ferry that I took across Lake Michigan. So she's about 2 weeks behind me, but she is still going, and you got to love that.
Yeah, Kay was on 2 episodes.
Right. And she has that site. She is raising money, K Bikes for Kids. And it's about raising money to feed children at schools. And when they're at home for the weekend or when they're on summer vacation, that they can still get to food programs. So it's a real good cause that Kay is riding across the country for.
Yeah, but it's great that you're keeping in touch.
Yeah. You know, also, when I was in Lansing, I think I told you I hung out with the guys from the Lansing Bike Party, and they put a picture on Facebook, and they were all wearing their bike T-shirts, and I was just wearing a regular shirt. So Andy Rohrer, who is the executive director of the League of Michigan Bicyclists, sent me some League of Michigan Bicyclists T-shirts, and one of them says Bike Nerd on it. And I just wonder if Andy sent that to me specifically, or that's a shirt that they have on a regular basis.
I feel like that's probably a popular shirt.
Yeah, okay, good. So you're not calling me a nerd then?
Nerd is not always an insult.
Very good. And I got to tell you, I think you and I are both, Nick, are bike nerds.
Well, I mean, a nerd is just somebody who's interested in things, right, that aren't sports and like popular music and what else?
Bicycles.
Well, it is bicycles. Yes, that is the thing. That is, could be a nerd if you're into it. If you're into it in the way that we're into it.
Right. But, you know, also I met the McGraw family in Minneapolis, and they were so welcoming to me. And Ben Fromagen, who I rode with last week, and I thought that conversation that we had was really interesting. And I must say, I played the episode for Marga, my wife, and she got kind of upset because I said, you know, my wife doesn't share this same, you know, passion that I do for cycling. And she kind of got upset and said, well, do I keep you from biking? And I was like, no, hey, you know, we're talking about something bigger than all of that. And when she heard the whole episode, she ended up kind of calming down and liking it. And so I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, you got to hear the whole episode.
Right. And one last friend that I met is Jake Hess, who was on the show a couple of times, and we have quoted him a couple of times. And last night, his band was playing in downtown Los Angeles. So I went down and heard them, and they were great. It was really a scene. And I have a little clip of music from Jake Hess. Is that okay to play that?
Yeah.
So here's Jake Hess and his band. So that was Jake Hess and Flotilla at a downtown LA Boomtown Brewery jam session.
Nice. It's good to have friends.
Yeah.
Did you bike there?
I did, of course. Yeah.
You just lock it up?
I locked it up right outside.
Nice. Did Jake bike there?
You know, I did not ask him, but I'm guessing he did not because he went with his guitar and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah, right. Cargo bike, trailer.
There you go. Cargo bike it is.
All right. Well, we got a lot of listeners to last week's show. And I think it might be because people wanted to see what a bike podcast was saying, a bike show was saying about the federal purging of proven safety countermeasures, including bike lanes, from
Right.
its list of ways that traffic deaths and injuries are reduced.
Right. It's the federal information about what people can read about how to make their streets safer. Yeah.
There was an article about this that I found on Substack called Bicycling is Partisan Now, and it's by Lo Sontag. I talked to her. Lo Sontag. We found out that you've listened or you just like the idea of Bike Talk since we were on Kill Radio.
I've been off and on listening to your show almost 20 years. I'm like, is this the Bike Talk? And I was like, oh man, that's so cool. So I was just stoked that you got a hold of the article.
You wrote, Bicycles are partisan now. Neoliberalism has failed bicycle advocacy.
Yes.
Tell me about yourself.
I essentially do a media project, D1011 Suburban Review. I talk about law and political economy, transportation, urbanism, public space, hegemony. I try to talk about things in a way that show how we're all connected. You know, I'm very into complex system theory and things such as that. I kind of view myself as, rather than a urban critic, I view myself as a suburban critic. And so I'm always trying to look and see how we move around and how we use our space, how our social relations work, and how it shapes power and relationships. I think about Henri Lefebvre. You know, space is a means of production. And that is kind of what my life has been about generally, since some people might know one of my old projects was the bus bench in the aughts. So I'm still kind of doing that. Now it's on Substack. So thank you for finding that.
When you say space is a means of production, I naturally think of what we're supposed to do with the means of production. We're supposed to take it back. Is that why that's a useful way of looking at it?
Yes. I mean, I feel like bike lanes aren't just transportation infrastructure. They're a redistribution of public space. Mm-hmm. I don't just think of like bicycling as transportation. I think bicycling is democracy, it's public power. It's who gets to use public space. And I think that is kind of why I am always kind of looking at it through that lens. I feel like bicycling is a political question and not a lifestyle choice. A lot of times people want to get grants and things like that. And so for decades, we've been talking about like, oh, bicycling is about health and recreation or personal choice. And I'm not saying those things don't matter, but, you know, I think in a way they kind of like obscure like this deeper political question of who controls space. Mm-hmm. A lane dedicated to cars is a political decision. We use our public commons to park cars. And I just think a lane dedicated to cars is a political decision. A protected bike lane is also a political decision. And neither of those things are neutral. And transportation systems distribute power, access, and freedom.
Your article is about what happened with the Department of Transportation taking down 5 of 28 proven safety countermeasures for reducing roadway fatalities and serious injuries on our nation's highways. You wrote, can we read the first paragraph? The partisan?
Sure. The partisan in bicycling is not about blue or red. Bicycles are partisan because they shift power from corporations and towards ordinary people. Protected bike lanes, slower streets, and road diets redistribute public space from auto asphyxiation to earth and anthropocentric metrics. This is a political choice.
Yeah. So we've been talking on this show back and forth about either biking isn't a right-left issue or that it shouldn't be, because biking really embodies things that conservatives are supposed to value, like independence and self-reliance, and I would say freedom.
Yes.
But the MAGA hate biking. They took everything with the word bike in it away. They're calling them DEI bike lanes. They took away road diets, but then they took away things like speed cameras and something called appropriate speed limits for all road users, and something called variable speed limits, which is just, it's hard to understand.
people kind of think in this way like, oh, it's Democrat or Republican or like red and blue. Like we divide by gender, we divide by culture, but really it's about people who have power and people who don't have power, you know? And it's concentrated power versus distributed power. And cars like require like large capital expenditures. Dependence on automobiles concentrate economic power in automakers, oil companies, insurers, road builders, and bicycles give people direct control over mobility. It's democratic. I mean, the reason why they're against it, even though they have all of the, this is safer, this is independent, but they don't want you to be independent. They want the liberty of princes and they want you to be their slave. That's what MAGA and conservatives see themselves as. So it's like this whole idea that you can be independent and you can have freedom and ride your... No, freedom is not for you. I don't understand why people never could see that this wasn't about, we're not explaining it correctly. Or they 100% know it is not about safety. This is not about even like, DEI. This is about how can I break you? How can I break you? And I think that in a way, when bicycle advocacy looked at itself as nonpartisan or apolitical, I don't think it was the most prudent move because it is political. If you don't know what the story is, if you don't know what the play is, you don't know how to combat things. And if you're thinking like, they're on our side, bike lanes redistribute public space. Parking spaces, travel lanes, like roadways, those are all forms of public resource allocation. So a road diet is not just about engineering intervention. It's reallocating scarce public space. It privileges access. I even hate using the word safety because how they use it. It privileges access, safety, human activity over vehicles. It's just like every protected bike lane is a miniature land reform project. I hate using the term reform, but it's a reimagining of what we could be in this modern era. And they do not want this kind of freedom, not for us. And the thing is so funny is that there's probably people in MAGA who probably do ride their bikes. I am sure there are a lot of places that you go to. There might be people there who are Republican, who are conservative, et cetera, and they ride their bicycles. They don't view us, and I mean by us, the working class, anybody who has to work for a living, as human beings. So bicycling is not for us. Transportation is about social relations, and you don't get to have that. You get to work for us. The purpose of transportation isn't movement, okay? The purpose of transportation is enabling social relations, visiting friends, accessing school, participating in civic life, finding employment. The metrics shouldn't be about like, can we help the economy? Can we go faster? I think a lot of times within bicycling, what happened was because of neoliberalism, they were like, okay, how can I fit within this grant? And they started to drink their own Kool-Aid. Like, okay, remember, we were just saying this to get money. Like we weren't actually supposed to believe that. Like that wasn't supposed to be real. And then I think at some point people lost the script. They're just kind of like, yes, we are riding bicycles because that can help capitalism. Like, dude, like, okay, I get it that that's what you had to do to get your grant fulfilled. But no one, like, that's not why we were actually riding our bikes. You also know that the right doesn't actually buy that, right? They don't really care. We should never have been using the metrics in our own house that the capitalists were using.
Which approaches of advocates are you thinking of, for example? Like when they're trying to pitch projects for funding, and I know they try to fit whatever the grant is. But like, do you have any that particularly fit the description of what you're describing? Something
that I thought was very interesting is what the League of American Cyclists. Why are they hanging out with Waymo? What is that? That doesn't make any sense to me. That is wild to me.
Well, Waymo is funding other bike advocacy organizations.
Oh, right? Yes, they are. I know. I had to start at the top. Yeah. We have to start at the top and work our way down. But yes, it's like you're using funding from Waymo. I think about Uber. And Uber said, safety third. There's a book called I Was Killed by a Traffic Engineer.
Yeah.
In that book, he was like, yeah, Uber said safety third. We are essentially combining and working with people. I want to call it the rise of platform urbanism. Who is bike infrastructure for? Is it for residents? Is it for workers? Is it for platforms? Is it for investors?
You end by saying bicycling is not neutral.
I'm glad I have this article up. Bicycling is not neutral. At its best, it's about empowering people over systems that prioritize speed, profit, and control. Advocates need to start acting like it. I look at like Mandami, I look at like the political candidates that we're having now that are like, hey, business as usual. We're not doing this. I'm going to make free buses. I think about Katie Wilson in Seattle. I mean, these are all people who are making a lot of change. And I would like to see that same kind of change in bicycling advocacy, because I guess I'm not seeing as much progress as I think I would like to see. I'm seeing a lot of people, I'm seeing a lot of books, I'm seeing a lot of people talking about things, but outside of like Manhattan, and maybe outside of like, some areas like Portland, in places like New Jersey, I'm not seeing what should be done. New Jersey is relatively small. It's a dense state. It's an urban state. So there's no reason that we shouldn't have a decent bicycle infrastructure. And I think that's something that's really kind of disturbing, that we don't have this bicycling infrastructure. And I think it's because we're catering to metrics that don't actually result in better bicycle infrastructure. I don't think we're making progress. And now our federal government is taking off the gloves and like, we're not doing this at all. We don't want people on the street. We want things to move as quickly as possible. And we don't want people to have power. We don't want people to have independence. It's disturbing to me. Auto asphyxiation isn't a natural occurring kink. It's a political project maintained through law.
Auto asphyxiation.
Yes.
Did you make that term?
Yes, actually, I did make that up. The automobile is one of the most successful dependency projects ever created. It ties participation in society to debt, fuel purchases, insurance payments, parking infrastructure, continuous consumption. And the bicycle is not about like, oh, this is good and this is bad, but because it's one of the few mobility technologies that interrupts this. I ride my bicycle to work like every day. It's freeing. I get to talk to people. I get to see people. I get to be on the streets. I get to look at the birds. I don't see bicycling as a lifestyle. I see it as a modest form of decommodification. It allows people to meet their basic social needs while relying less on like debt, and cars turn mobility into comorbidity. And bicycles move us like one step closer to treating mobility as a public good. And I think that's something that's really important.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your article. The title is
Bicycles Are Partisan Now. They always were.
We can go to suburbanreview.com.
Correct.
You could just search for Bicycles Are Partisan Now, right?
Yeah. It should come up pretty easily.
Thank you for your article.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nick.
I like the way Lo was talking about space, and a protected bike lane is a reimagining and a land reform, and that's why MAGA hates it.
Because it's reimagining our city streets, or because it's taking away from cars? I mean, she was kind of saying everything, I thought.
Yeah. Because it's power. It's
Right.
taking the power back, because you don't have to rely on automobile companies, insurers, oil companies.
Gasoline, right.
You don't have to be indebted to the powers.
Well, biking is freedom, and it's freedom on the road, and it's freedom from all those debts, that you pay when you own a car. Totally.
Right. So I want to get back to your friends, Taylor, that you are making.
Taylor and his friends.
Yeah, along the way.
Right.
Because it's not just the ones in real life. You have friends online. We got a listener email from Tim Dyet.
Right. Yeah, Tim.
You want to read it?
Hey, Taylor and Nick. I have to say, Taylor, your bike packing adventure inspired me. I decided to go on a 2-week trip starting on August 23rd, riding from Buffalo to New York City along the Erie Canal Trail to the Hudson River and finishing in New York City. I haven't visited New York in 7 years, and I want to see all the improvements that have been made to the city since Mayor Mondami took office. It's actually been longer than Mondami. That's me adding that in. After that, Tim goes on to say, I plan to load my bike onto an Amtrak for a ride back to Buffalo, which will be well needed after 550 something miles. What really struck me from your trip, Taylor, was the phrase, want a job, book a vacation. Well, just after blocking off my calendar for this trip, I got a job offer as the pianist at the Buffalo Gay Men's Chorus and the Nickel City Troublemakers. They're absolutely fine with me starting after my adventure. Wish me luck. I'll be rocking the Bike Talk sticker you sent me a while back on my panniers. Sincerely, Tim Dyet.
I thought this was one of the best emails we've gotten because, I mean, well, first of all, I was also inspired, and I took a bike trip, a 2-day, like 100-mile total bike trip, and here's somebody else. And so, they say if you have 2 mice in your house, you probably got like 100 mice.
Is that? I haven't heard that.
I'm just making an analogy.
Right.
Like,
and I'm glad it's mice and not rats.
Yeah. I live in the country. If you have 2, you got me, you got Tim, there's got to be more people who are thinking, wow, if Taylor can do it, I can do it maybe.
Exactly. And if Taylor can do it, you totally can do it.
Well, you do ride like centuries ordinarily anyway.
Yeah, I'm a biker, but again, you don't have to ride from San Francisco to East Lansing, Michigan. You can ride to Trader Joe's. You can ride one night. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that we're making a statement by getting on a bike and going from point A to point B. Yeah.
What I also thought was great about this email from Tim is, he is reminding us about these trails. I don't know if it's the Empire Trail, but we had somebody on about the Empire State Trail, Patrick from Rolling Through on PBS. And so we're reminded about that and New York City's improvements with Mamdani. And then it's also, he got a job because he took a vacation, like you said.
I love that. And I love the fact, Nick, that they were willing to wait for him to get back from his adventure. So that's really wonderful.
And he mentioned Amtrak, and there's something new out about Amtrak. It's a report from League of American Bicyclists that grades all 46 Amtrak lines for bicycle friendliness.
Does it say which are the best? I mean, what are the best?
It says, I'm just from looking at it, the Cascades, then the Gold Runner were the only 2 with excellent scores.
Wow.
That came close to railways in Belgium and Switzerland. And then the Hiawatha, the Pacific Surfliner, and Wolverine were in the top 5.
Wow. Well, I got to tell you, because the train I took from Los Angeles to San Francisco, I don't think it was the Surfliner, was not great. They gave different information online than was the actual information on the ground when I got there. They said I could roll my bike right on the train and not have to store it in a baggage compartment. And when I got there, they made me store the bike in a baggage compartment and take my panniers off. So I had to carry all that stuff with me through the train when I went to look for a place to sit. And then also, the train did not have Wi-Fi, and online it said that it had Wi-Fi. And normally that wouldn't be a problem, except that train goes through some areas along the coast of California that don't have cell coverage. So I'm glad that the league is out there rating these train routes, and I'm glad that Amtrak takes bikes, but I was a little bit bummed out at the one I took.
Yeah, well, that's too bad, because trains and bikes go together.
Go together, totally. And listen, it was not the end of the world,
Yeah. Yeah, it worked out, right? I mean, you got there. And and I don't want to discourage Tim.
No. And I think Tim's whole ride is going to be on bike trails.
Oh, yeah, cool. You had another person reach out on Blue Sky who's pinged us, I guess, who's tagged us before. Nietifa.
What's our Blue Sky name again?
Biketalk.bsky.social.
Oh, okay.
Bike Talk, basically. they said it might be an interesting topic for Taylor to dig into more. A limited driver's license, like his dad described, kind of already did with Jim Pokrass, but question mark. This was 12 days ago. This was after the episode with your dad.
Right. Well, I think that's a wonderful idea for super speeders, for drunk drivers, for, people that have a history of bad driving on the way to losing their license, maybe, give them a limited license only to and from work or something like that.
Yeah.
And
So
of course,
thanks,
I think the
Nietifa.
whole super speeder law is wonderful, where they actually put in intelligent speed controls onto those cars.
Totally.
And, people can also reach us at biketalk.org. There's an email sign there. And our email is
livebiketalk@gmail.com.
livebiketalk@gmail.com.
I don't know.
Is that joke too old?
It was old the first time I heard it. And now, by popular demand, a Swedish researcher to explain how you can get people to understand why we need bike infrastructure without them already having bike infrastructure to experience. This is Stephan Gosling, a professor of tourism at Linnaeus University in Sweden. Stephan, you came out with a study called The Social Cost of Automobility, Cycling, and Walking in the European Union. And so I thought we could talk about that.
My pleasure. Thanks, Nick.
So your study showed that the cost of driving is systematically underestimated.
Well, the essential thing is probably that most people think that what they pay for their car is the fuel that they need. But there's so much more in the background that you tend to forget. And there's also a social cost involved. That is all the externalities that the society pays that are not covered by the taxes that are involved in, for example, the cost of fuel. And if you consider all of that, driving is quite expensive, both for the individual, but also for society.
These are the externalities that we don't think about. I mean, there's so many, right? I mean,
Yeah, many are related to health. Of course, insurance does cover collisions in traffic, but the health cost of air pollution, for example, is not covered. The cost of climate change, right now a big issue in Europe with the heat wave that is going through, all of that is causing a health cost that is not considered in taxes.
Have you calculated how much of the emissions that cause climate change, the heat wave and all that, how much is due to driving?
Yeah, we obviously went through the numbers. I should not be giving you specific values right now because it's changing all the time. The study is already a few years old. But essentially, you can say the car is causing a social cost that is maybe in the order of 20, 30 cents per kilometer that a car is driven. Obviously, you have other transport modes that we also looked at, like the bicycle and walking. And there you have a social benefit, which was the most interesting outcome here, perhaps, of our study, because it suggests that if you can, as a city planner, for example, get people to cycle more, to walk more, that is a benefit to society because these people tend to be healthier and to cause less externalities for society. The specific economic line of research that we've done was mostly to see what the cost is that is involved in the expansion of certain transport systems. And that was not my idea. It was Copenhagen that was first out. They had a new mayor who wanted to expand on cycling. That obviously was not pleasing all parties. They made an agreement in the local city council that a study should be commissioned that would look into the cost per kilometer for the bicycle as compared to the car. And then the results would inspire the public policy afterwards. That was done in 2009 already. The study showed that while a kilometer driven by the car caused a certain externality, the benefit by cycling was almost the same, quite a big gap then between the two. And that then inspired today's policy in Copenhagen, which is still an investment of about 40 euro per person per year in cycle tracks and lanes and preferential treatment of cycling in the city.
Copenhagen's doing well when it comes to biking.
In Europe, Copenhagen is probably the city people will talk about when talking about cycling. It's quite interesting as well in terms of how the framing then was done, because, the tricky issue when you restrict car traffic is always about the communication. And the one general conclusion that I've drawn over the years is that you should never argue against the car, because for many people, the car is very important. The car has a direct connection to identities, and you can't argue against the car without upsetting people. And in Copenhagen, people never argued even about the car. It wasn't even mentioned in public discussions and communication campaigns. Rather, they framed the Copenhagener as someone who is cycling as the natural means of transportation. And that worked very well, as can be exemplified by one statistic that I love a lot. It's that 70% of car drivers in Copenhagen think that more should be done for cyclists. That indicates, in my opinion, that those people driving cars have understood that everybody no longer driving a car and rather switching to a cycle is actually a benefit to them, because it's a requirement of less space that you have in the city, and that makes traffic flows better with less waiting times. So it's a benefit for both sides.
That's amazing that drivers realize that people switching to bikes is a benefit to them. And it makes sense, because if you ever look at a car commercial, there's no other cars in it.
Yeah, the funny thing is that in Europe, where most people do both have a car and cycle as well, you can see how we have multiple identities, really. When you are in a car, you see the world out of the car driver's perspective. And when you are on a bicycle, you see it out of the cyclist's perspective. I think because people now have these multiple identities, it's quite easy to see how cycling is a benefit. And if you need to drive a car, how it is a benefit to you if others don't use the car, because then traffic flows are just better. Because ultimately in cities, we cannot create more space. It's limited. And if you want to ease traffic congestion, you need to find ways that make people move away from using their cars. And if people want to do that voluntarily by cycling, perfect.
That people have multiple identities is interesting. The fact that people have identities that are invested in their cars or in driving is interesting. People identify as bike riders, for sure.
Yeah, that's also why the general transport culture that you have in a city is quite important to consider. When you have a car culture where it's the norm that you would use your car, you have to be much more careful in implementing policies that favor cyclists, simply because so many people will think that these policies are indirectly directed against them. On the other hand, if you have something that resembles a cyclist culture that we now have in mostly every European city, it's much easier to get people understand that more cycling has many benefits for cities. It's obviously not just traffic flow, it's also less pollution, less noise, less heat in summer. All of these are benefits that people will understand. And then I think it's much easier to move forward towards implementing more cycle tracks.
Do you have any thoughts about places where you don't have that biking culture, how to create that?
Yeah, North America is always a headache to me, because the cities there are comparably young. They were originally having quite a large share of walking and then also cycling. There were tram systems in most cities in the US, but many of these were then bought by oil and ripped out of cities to make space for cars. Walking became almost a traffic offense if you engage in jaywalking, for example. And that then created the modern system of automobility from the 60s onwards, where cities were really built for car traffic, where in many US neighborhoods anyway, you will not even have walks in suburban neighborhoods. Everything is built for cars.
No sidewalk.
No sidewalks. And that is obviously much more difficult to change than in Europe, where you have already a much denser city structure where more locations can be reached within a rather shorter period of time. On the other hand, roads are much wider in North America, and perhaps there is an opportunity to dedicate some of that space to people who want to engage in active mobility.
You need the will.
You need the will, as always.
We're just so far talking about cities, so where there's density.
Outside cities, it's getting complicated. Even in Europe, we have strong trends towards more cars. There's really a polarization ongoing between cities that increasingly focus on active mobility and then the countryside where the car is becoming increasingly important, also because public transport often is dysfunctional. What many cities start to do, at least in Germany, for example, is to create more cycle tracks that are built specifically for e-bikes, where you can reach speeds of 45 kilometers by bike, and where it becomes feasible then to even cover distances of up to 10, maybe 15 kilometers to work. And people start actually commuting by bike, even though it's a larger distance, simply because it's so convenient. You obviously have some benefits as well. There's a lower cost involved. You don't have to think about parking. All these issues are then also covered.
And again, you need the will. In this country, the problem that we're having politically, which you probably have noticed, a lot of people won't look to Europe. If they find out that they're doing this in Europe, that'll be a reason not to do it.
Yeah, well, I'm not alien to that situation. I think we have the same trends over here. For all those with some rationality remaining, just consider that every bicyclist takes less space and is actually a gift to you, and is not something or someone who's outcompeting you in your car or questioning you.
Wow. Every cyclist is a gift to you, the driver. I wish we could have a campaign for that.
Yeah.
So you're a professor of tourism, and bike tourism can bring billions per state here. You hear about the Empire Trail in New York State brought in over $1 billion in a year. I heard bike tourism in Oregon brings in over $1 billion. What do you do as a professor of tourism?
I'm studying transport systems, essentially. Tourism is the social science of mobility, if you want. So obviously, it's very interesting to see how different transport modes can be favored. And we've seen a lot of ambition in many countries to increase the share of people coming by public transport, using public transport, using bikes, and use trails to hike. At the same time, obviously, there has to be a demand for this kind of product. And that is another promising trend, that people actually want to be active. They don't want to be sitting in a car all the time. If the weather is good, you can have fantastic experiences using a bike. There's specific bikes. You might use electric mountain bikes, for example, makes it much easier to go over trails and cover elevations. All of that is something that could be turned into something more beneficial for everyone, because you have all the benefits that cycling brings. At the same time, you have an economic base that is often much stronger. Cycling tourists often would feature as people with comparably high income, and these people are then spending quite large amounts of money on food, on accommodation that can benefit a destination. So the fact that there is so much money being spent by cycling tourists is speaking to the relevance of this segment in tourism, and as something that is promising for more destination marketing organizations to consider.
The last thing I just wanted to say that I was struck by recently, speaking of the costs of biking, walking, and driving, as in your study, the social cost of automobility, cycling, and walking in the European Union, it costs about 40 calories a mile to bike, and it costs like 8,000 to drive.
I'm not sure people will consider that, so I would reframe it. I would argue that we do have a lot of studies showing that both your physical and your mental health improve massively once you start cycling. And those people taking up cycling won't go back. They will stay with it simply because they feel better. Look at calories as much as you want. It's the gut feeling that should count, and you will see a lot of people will like it for that reason.
Well, thank you, Stephan. This is great work that you're doing. Good to know that you're doing it. Do you ever get in touch with other academics doing the same kind of stuff? We have some on the show, and I've thought you guys should be talking to each other.
Yeah, of course. Right now, I'm working mostly with super yachts. I've not done a cycling-related project for some time, even though we are now working on cargo bikes, but that is just upcoming.
Let us know when you have something to say about cargo bikes.
Yeah, sure.
Great. Thanks, Stephan.
Thanks. Okay. Take care.
Have
a great day.
So we had Jens from Norway, another listener, ask for a Swedish researcher to find a way to convince people of the facts about bike lanes and why we need them and why they make it better for everybody, even drivers, without having to put a bike lane in over their objections.
Right.
And, you know, there's takeaways from this. The main one is that cars cost society huge amounts if you look at their total effect, their impact. But when people walk or bike, it saves society money.
Right. And air quality and traffic violence and all of that. And cars also just cost individuals so much money.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like it's unsustainable.
It is. It is.
Yeah, everyone in the world can't have a car. And
on top of that, Nick, everyone doesn't need to drive a car for every single errand that they do. If we create a safe place for people to bike and walk, they can go to the store, school, work, their friend's house, coffee, you know, whatever it might be. But there's no reason to get into a car to go 5 blocks, a mile, 2 miles.
yeah, but how do you get people to see this? Because they have to see it to believe it. But how do you get them to believe it without seeing it? And I think the point that Stephan made is that you show how biking benefits everyone, but it's not effective to argue against cars. You show how everybody on a bike is one less person in traffic in front of you in a car.
Right.
And people in Copenhagen understand that. But
life is better for everybody when more people ride bikes.
Right.
I'm Stacey with this week's news. First up, in the Bay Area, after years of intense debate, the Berkeley City Council has officially approved protected bike lanes for Hopkins Street. Since 2011, the high-injury corridor has seen 46 crashes involving pedestrians or cyclists. 8 of those were severe, including 3 fatalities. While local opposition cited concerns over parking and small business impacts, the council voted to prioritize climate action and traffic safety. The protected cycle track will run from the Alameda to the Ohlone Greenway as part of a street repaving project slated for 2027. Meanwhile, on the south side of Chicago, a similar infrastructure project on Archer Avenue in Brighton Park has become a political flashpoint. The city's complete streets redesign, featuring concrete protected bike lanes, pedestrian refuge islands, and curb extensions, aims to curb high crash rates. However, local cycling advocates report that genuine community debates over parking are being weaponized. Mass text campaigns and organized protests backed by political action groups have turned the safety project into a proxy war against local progressive leadership. Despite the political noise and rising tensions on the ground, advocates emphasize that physical barriers remain the most effective tool to protect pedestrians and riders. Tragedy in New York City this weekend underlines why those physical barriers are so crucial. Early Saturday morning, a woman in her 60s or 70s was fatally struck by an SUV driver while standing in a painted bike lane on 99th Street in Queens. The driver fled the scene without stopping and remains at large. Police are still working to identify the victim. Finally, the Gordie Howe International Bike Club had its inaugural ride on Wednesday, August 5th, with the opening of the toll-free multi-use path of the Gordie Howe International Bridge connecting Detroit and Windsor, Ontario. The 1.5-mile path features concrete barriers separating cyclists from traffic and leads directly to dedicated customs facilities. Local advocates who have campaigned for this river crossing for nearly 2 decades say it links up seamlessly with Detroit's Joe Louis Greenway, opening up incredible new international touring routes.
I think the big news this week in bike advocacy may be Berkeley, California voted to put the protected bike lane on Hopkins Avenue in Berkeley, taking away more parking spots than they've ever taken away.
Right.
And,
you know, we've been talking about headwinds and tailwinds, and last week we talked about the headwinds coming from the federal government, but there are some tailwinds coming from local governments. And we have Robert Prinz on from Bike East Bay, and he's going to explain how they've been fighting for the Hopkins bike lane, Nick, for years, like 8 years. And it's still not going to go in right now, but the city council did vote 7-2 to continue with the process. So that is good news.
And you got the interview.
Yep. Robert Prinz, thanks for coming on Bike Talk. Tell us what's going on with the Hopkins Avenue bike lane.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. And yeah, this is definitely in the heart of the Bike East Bay area, but even more so, our local partners with Walk Bike Berkeley are the local group representing that area. And there's even an even more local group called North Berkeley now that's specifically been working on issues in that part of town in Berkeley for a while. This was really a collaborative effort to try to get this project over the finish line. We've had a lot of projects like this, unfortunately, but the concept first came up in the City of Berkeley's last bike plan update, which was 2017.
Wow, that was 9 years ago, right?
Exactly, yeah. And so, yeah, 2017, there was a recommendation to study Hopkins for a protected bikeway, just a feasibility study. The city did come up with a recommendation, took it to city council. It was actually voted on twice previously. One was a 8-0 vote in favor, and the second one was a 7-1 vote in favor. But then even after that, the city council member who represented that district got cold feet when some of the neighbors in the area learned about how much car parking would be affected by the project. And then so even after that, those votes, they still kind of wanted the project to come back to council yet again for another review and with more information about the car parking impacts.
Car parking certainly is a concern for, businesses and neighbors. What will the net loss of parking be if this plan is put into place? I mean, the plan's not even picked exactly yet, right?
Right. The original version of it, the local bike advocates were compromising with business owners and some of the other folks in the neighborhood, try to minimize the car parking impact. So I think the original project was estimated between 70 to 80 car parking spaces would be converted. And the way they were doing that is to create a two-way cycle track on one side of the street. That's a street with a lot of driveways and there are a number of intersections, including non-signalized intersections. So two-way cycle tracks can be really tricky in those contexts to make it work and make sure all the crossing movements are safe. But we were willing to compromise and continue working on the details to improve safety in order to preserve more car parking and keep that site happy in order to get the project through. But then it turned out that wasn't even keeping them happy, that any amount of car parking, I think, was going to be a deal breaker for some folks. So that plan came to a stalemate. It was going to be implemented with paving as well. And so the paving also was on hold. And then basically the streets just continued to degrade ever since, then, not making, a good situation for anybody, really.
Right, which is often the problem, right? They put off fixing the street until this problem is resolved. It sounds like there was a pretty vocal group, and I love their name, Friends of Hopkins. And it sounds like they should be friends of the status quo. But a spokesperson for them, Donna D. Dimer, spoke up, and she said the people who voted for the plan prioritized the demands of cyclists over the needs of current residents. And then she went on to say that we knew that we had facts and data on our side, but it was simply not enough to overcome the ideology. How do you respond to that? The ideology of the demands of the cyclists. First of all, I don't think facts and data are on their side.
Right. When it comes to ideology, there's certainly some folks out there who just would be okay with getting rid of all the car parking and converting it to other uses. We want to be realistic. We understand that there is an impact on local businesses. We want those business districts to thrive. We want them to have customers and people to be able to get around, especially, people with mobility constraints. So we don't downplay those impacts, but what we want to do is work with the design details of the project in order to prioritize those uses. Currently, there's no metered parking at all in the corridor, even though through the business areas. So that means that people tend to overstay.
Sure.
There's actually famously one white van outside a grocery store in that area on Hopkins. And if you can look at the Google Street View over the years and go back maybe 10 years, and that van is always in the same spot. There's been no consideration of how the current parking is being used and how it could be used better.
Right.
Even with the reduction, it's not necessarily about how many spaces there are, it's how many people are able to use them, either by parking or in other ways, by biking in the road. Or It's not just a bike project. There's also bus boarding islands to improve the bus stops. There's pedestrian safety elements. So there's lots of different ways that people could be using that space. So thinking about how people are using the space, not just how many car parking spaces there are, I think is a better metric to go on. And then the other important metric is safety. One of the reasons why this project was in the 2017 Berkeley bike plan in the first place was because it was on what's called the high injury corridor in the city. It's a small percentage of streets that see the highest number of fatal and severe crashes, and there have been fatal crashes since the 2017 bike plan on that corridor. Even, we don't want to downplay the impact on individuals with parking. We want to make sure to see what we can do to mitigate that in any reasonable way, with the project details. especially high priority spots like adding more blue curb spaces and loading zones for people who need to use those.
Right.
And adding meters to create turnover and create more customers. So yeah, making sure that those individuals who have the most mobility constraints are getting priority access to the curb in the places where parking is limited. So that's the stuff that we want to focus on, make sure those impacts are minimized. But at the same time, safety is still the top priority. And so we want to make sure that is the primary focus of the project.
Maybe you can tell us what'll happen now that the city council has voted to move ahead with the plan.
Well, I think the most significant thing that happened was the 2024 election. There's a lot of changes. Elections can make big differences, and we definitely have seen that in Berkeley. The council member who was most opposed to the project in the district where it was scheduled to happen ran for mayor and then lost. And that was the same year that she would have been up for her council district, so she wasn't able to hold on to her council seat either. The person who beat her is actually very bike-friendly, Mayor Ishii, who's now representing the city of Berkeley. In addition, there's several new council members that came on board that also had bikes as a focus. And it really kind of flipped the script in terms of the majority of council in support of high quality bikeways like this. At the same time, in 2024, our friends at Walk Bike Berkeley and others campaigned to pass a ballot measure called Measure FF that was going to bring in more funding for paving, but it also had a requirement similar to Measure HLA in Los Angeles,
Sure.
but maybe a little bit more effective at implementation, saying whenever you use this Measure FF funding that you're supposed to implement the bike plan. And then even more recently, 2026, Berkeley just adopted a new version of their 2017 bike plan that still has that Hopkins recommendation in it. So they, throughout the course of their entire 17 bike plan, they weren't able to get to it, but they reaffirmed their commitment to doing it just this past month. So we had some of those new council members and some of the older ones who were putting together a plan at first that said, we just want to move forward with the paving because it's gotten so bad. We're going to do some pedestrian safety upgrades and nothing else. There's kind of a revolt among the advocates at that point, be like, wait, hold a minute. We've been, waiting on this for a while. We got you all this new money. We need to be part of this conversation. So at that point, some of the other council members got together, came up with an alternate plan, took it to their Transportation Commission. Transportation Commission gave it their thumbs up, which meant it was going to council. And that new plan had a mile of protected bikeway included, no longer the two-way cycle track on one side, but actually one-way protected bikeways on both sides, which actually will now have more of an impact on the curbside car parking than the previous one that the opponents rejected. It's kind of like at this point, we're like, well, if they're going to reject it either way, why don't we just do what we want to do?
Right.
And so that's the plan that was brought forward to council. And ultimately, there was 3 hours of public comment, 1 minute each over 3 hours, and then a long time of council deliberations that went on until 1 a.m. in the morning.
Wow.
And ultimately, they voted 7 in favor to 2 against to support the original protected bikeway plan, not the extension, not the additional study, and not the watered down.
Wow, if it's this difficult in a city like Berkeley, it really is maddening that it takes so long and it is so oriented toward allowing every person to speak. And, we always bring up the analogy, if it was the sewer system, we wouldn't listen to every neighbor to speak or something like that. It's amazing that these projects get done. It sounds like this one is on track. What's the next step to finalize the plan and then implement it? And what's the time frame for that?
The good news is because it's happening with paving and not with a major grant-funded project, the city can get to it pretty quick. They already have basically the funding. The council resolution was giving staff the ability to go design the project, do a little bit more community outreach to inform the design details, but we've given you the bullet points about what you're going to do. That'll happen hopefully over the coming months. And then the paving plan says to do the project in 2028. So we've got just a short amount of time to do a little bit more outreach, design the project, get the plan together, raise a little bit more funding in order to pay for some additional details, and then go to construction either late 2027 or early 2028.
Great. We talk a lot about headwinds and tailwinds, and maybe there's a little bit of a tailwind in this project, and it will get implemented. I hope you can keep us abreast of what the outcome is, when it's implemented, and is there any backlash after it's implemented, or is it kind of like, oh, hey, this is pretty good because it works?
Yeah.
And there's, people kind of give up their fight.
Yeah, nothing's ever over until it's, and even after the
And even
concrete is
after that,
poured.
right? Yeah.
We've got, I said, elections matter. We've got another one coming up in November. As always, people, no matter what city you're in, go out and vote for bike-friendly candidates. It makes a difference.
How about you? Would you ever run for office?
I go to enough city council meetings as it is.
I mean, you might as well get paid to go, right?
But not very much in most of the cities. It's like a glorified volunteer gig in a lot of our East Bay cities.
We talk a lot about riders becoming advocates, advocates becoming politicians, politicians becoming leaders. Robert Prinz, thanks a lot for your leadership at Bike East Bay and for the information about the Hopkins Bike Lane in Berkeley, California.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Berkeley has something like Healthy Streets Los Angeles, which is the ballot measure they approved in Los Angeles, which requires the city to put in their bike plan whenever they repave a street.
Right, right.
So like it doesn't cost anything and it's required. But they've been slow walking it and just
They
ignoring
sure
it.
have. Yeah. It's been
in
very
LA,
frustrating.
But in Berkeley, not as bad.
Right.
Good show.
We want to thank all the friends of the show who have, been supporting the ride and been supporting our show all this time. But we also want to thank Lo Sontag and Stephan Gosling and Robert Prinz. And we want to thank our regulars, Julie Richard, Amy Ziering, Lindsay Sturman, Stacey Randecker, Kevin Burton, Josh Hagland, and Eric Sawyer.
Yes. I have a quote. I want to play something that Lo Sontag said.
Great.
Every protected bike lane is a miniature land reform project. It's a reimagining of what we could be in this modern era. I don't see bicycling as a lifestyle. I see it as a modest form of decommodification. It allows people to meet their basic social needs while relying less on debt. And bicycles move us one step closer to treating mobility as a public good. And I think that's something that's really important.
Well, she said it. Biking is a public good.
Thanks, Taylor.
Ride safe.
This episode of Bike Talk is sponsored by the law offices of Pocras and De Los Reyes, with offices in Los Angeles and Bakersfield and serving all of Southern California.
Bike Talk is a project of CRSP and the Los Angeles Eco-Village Institute. And that was Bike Talk. If you have a story, a tip, or a topic, head over to biketalk.org and send us a message. Talk again next week.
Keep it fit, get me there. I won't go sinking up the air. Leave behind the daily grind. Let your mind unwind. If it's life, pretend to life. Better get yourself a bike.
Get yourself a bike. Oh, 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 get yourself a bike.